then what values brands or corporates want to live with. Yeah. And what else is there?
What about this body image stuff?
The body image, see, if Axe has become a huge success across the world,
In spite of that.
correct?
In spite of that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it has become a very big success in the world because it never showed muscular men. It showed a nerdy man getting a girl. Because nerdy men will never get a girl, and then therefore they went and then advertised, saying that even nerdy men will get. So somewhere Indians have misunderstood the concept. They showed good-looking men getting more good-looking girls, correct? So it became such a stereotype that everybody is following. As you understand, in marketing, if everybody does the same thing, nobody will stand out. So there comes in a point, then people start thinking differently. Like Jockey, as a brand has thought differently, Jockey as nothing else, and then went on to something which is far more progressive because all the time marketers want to stand out. Correct. They don't want to spend more money and then stay in the clutter because they will never. So that itself, if 100 players are playing in the same deodorant market and all of them are doing the same imagery, forget about the morality, forget about progressiveness, forget about anything. It does not make business sense to them. Sooner or later, some of them have to move. That is the marketing principle. So some change will happen. And as I said, as the people start talking far more openly, and internet penetration goes much wider and then much deeper, then people will start knowing far more. Today, a lot of people are confined to what they see on television.
I just want to actually, sorry, if I may, I just want to add to that. I think the body image question and questions of these kind of stereotypes are actually go much deeper. I think it's a much deeper issue because it's a systemic issue. How are markets built? I mean, forget advertising. Advertising is just the foot soldier in a sense. It's what you see first. But how are markets built? If you look at the process by which markets are built, there are many stages to it. One of them involves traditional societies. Identity resides in a past. It is collective. As you move forward, the market society's identity becomes a quest. It lies ahead of you, and this quest for becoming myself and becoming yourself and realizing yourself. But that quest, in a consumption sense, is made up of incompleteness, of making yourself feel incomplete today and filling up those bits with acts of consumption. So in a sense, anxiety about the self. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I beautiful enough? Am I thin enough? Is my hair clean? Do I get dandruff? Do I get pimples? This is part of a much larger system which produces a need for a variety of products, which says you need this if you want to complete yourself. So it's an exercise in self-completion. Advertising necessarily has to follow. When you say that if I need to feel, why would you need so many beauty products? Why? I mean, the average number of beauty products used by a middle-class American woman, somebody was telling me, was some 64. This was somebody from Unilever sharing I don't know if it's true or not, I don't know. But it was, and it's like boggles the mind as to say, why would you need that many? I mean, what does this? But how has that got constructed? How has that got developed? So that advertising will create anxiety about the body. That advertising is a necessary part. Within that, you can have shades of sensitivity, you can have shades of extreme insensitivity. But this is a project, this is much larger than advertising. And I think which is the reason why I'm not arguing that there is no wiggle room or there is no, but it is part of a larger sort of a system that we have embraced in some form or the other.
Yeah, actually, that's something very interesting which you said. Advertising and marketing is based on the concept of insufficiency. And first and foremost, you have to create that anxiety about insufficiency in people. So where is your starting point only? Your starting point only is negative. So then within that frame, you can be a little less negative or a little more, and that's the struggle here.
Yeah. It's interesting that, to complete, let's say the same company which will have a Dove which which a lot of people will say, they talk about real beauty, and they've done commercials that are heartwarmingly sort of, the fact that normal sort of and standards of beauty and not these abnormal standards of beauty. The same company also does Sunsilk and also does a host of other brands which have extremely sort of unrealistic standards and depictions of beauty. So this is I'm just saying this, if in today's discourse it makes sense to present yourself in a certain way, that presentation takes place. But there is an underlying reason why negativity is inbuilt into so much of the advertising, and it just needs to be acknowledged.
Can you speak about the urban poor and the rural poor?
Yeah, so I think this advertising has always spoken to prosumers, what we called as progressive consumers. It's always been this thing of that you make your advertising aspirational, okay? And traditionally what used to happen, we used to say there is something called need gaps, and there's a product that comes in that fulfills that need, and advertising then actually represents that in a more aspirational manner. Today, with so much of choice and so much of confusion of plethora of products, we say that there is nothing called need gaps. There are only greed gaps left. Okay? So what needs are you fulfilling? Everything that you say has been, every need of a human being, at least when we're talking about progressive consumers, has been fulfilled. However, when it comes to rural segments, if I have a product that's targeting a rural segment, I would still look at a market penetration game. You would still start with saying, and which is the traditional advertising, am I actually doing something functional? So a small sachet, okay, a price point, affordability, value for money. Because when you're targeting the rural audience, you're actually looking at opening up the market and creating a bigger pie for yourself. And that kind of communication actually still goes back to the traditional way of there is a need that you need to create in that market for that particular product. So a smaller sachet, an affordable price point, something that will make your life a little more easier, effort and chores, need to reduce. So you still go back to doing functional advertising. But a lot of these segments, a lot of the products that we advertise, I mean, even today when I look at insurance, it's a very mainstream mass product, okay? It reaches out to as much, there's an LIC that sells to rural India as well. But when you have to take a call, what you would say is, let me at least talk to the prosumers, the urban market. At least it will be aspirational for the others as well. So that's how you go about trading off, in terms of rural versus urban. But coming to, studying values and this 56-inch chest that, the Modi political discourse that we are talking about, there is a shift in values that is happening today, and the same values, the way they are being interpreted. We stand for an honest life insurance company. We decided to study what does honesty mean to today's consumers, the role models of honesty and the icons of honesty. From a Mother Teresa and a Mahatma Gandhi, who were role models of honesty, you'll be surprised the kind of names that came about being as who are the icons of honesty. It's Narendra Modi and it is Dhirubhai Ambani. And then when you probe deeper, the insight that you get is that their honesty's got them somewhere. There is those idealistic values that today, if I become an idealist, they will tell you this, you will have the same fate of Anna Hazare. Literally, examples are being given. He's a very honest man. Look at where he is today. What happened to his honesty? If an honesty and a value doesn't get you to your destination, then it is of no good. So don't be an idealist, don't be a purist. Okay, we want honesty, but we want honesty that can be managed in such a way that it can get me to my destination. Look what Modi's done. So that's how youngsters today are changing. Now, do I factor that in? Yes, I factored it in my communication. Today, when I'm looking at doing my new campaign, I'm looking at linking honesty to success and end results. I'm not looking at honesty for the sake of honesty, because that's not acceptable.
Oh, okay, that's very interesting. Okay. What about Karwa Chauth? While you're at it.
So I think Santosh is the best one to talk about some of these cultural ones. Maybe I should hand over the mic to him.
I'd like to hear a man talking about Karwa Chauth. You guys are not going to get lunch, let me warn you. If you ask these kinds of questions, then you have to wait for the answers.
Okay, Karwa Chauth first in political discourse. Yeah. See, sorry. Okay. No, there are two ways of looking at the whole Karwa Chauth question. One, of course, at the base is the fact that marketers will exploit and utilize, any change where there is a commercial possibility. And if you look at how festivals have got reimagined, that they've got reimagined as what you've essentially done with a festival is taken out the painful bits of it and added the consumption bits of it, so that the wedding is 10-day affair, but the actual ceremony, you say jaldi kar do, fere jaldi kar do, let's crash that. But the dancing and all the rest of it is now more and more elaborate. So that there is a structure that is a larger structure that we follow in terms of how we reimagine festivals. Part of that is the reimagination of Karwa Chauth, which is being reimagined in a way. And so there are two ways. One is way of seeing it is it panders to a patriarchal institution. It promotes it, glorifies it, entrenches it, and so that a new generation of converts are made part of this larger patriarchal. It was limited to some parts of India, now it's everywhere. And so, and this has been done, thanks to Yash Chopra at the factory, and has been taken forward by advertising and Ekta. So there have been enough heroes in this movement. The other way of seeing it, and which is the way that I find more interesting, is that you take an idea and you subvert it. So change can be either looked at as something that will happen only along a trajectory which is from restricted to free, from collective to individual, etc., etc. Or change might actually have a more complex trajectory, in which case you see, by glorifying it, you hollow it out. And I think in India, a lot of traditions are being hollowed out. They are being reimagined in a way that the core, the idea of sacrifice, you hollow that out and actually convert that into its opposite, which is consumption. The attempt is to do that. Now, I suspect both are true. I suspect it is possible to argue it legitimately, the fact that this is a patriarchal institution that is being, it is. I mean, there is no running away from that. But simultaneously, in that glorification, there is also a hollowing out that is happening, where you are taking the meaning of the ritual and are trying to transform it, which is what individuals, when faced with a very strong collective and order, what is your room in an order that is given to you is to subvert. And I think if you look at change, particularly in the gender dimension, along the axis of subversion versus rebellion or overthrow of an existing order, you find that change perhaps is much more significant when you look at it through acts of subversion. Resistance that is mounted in ways that are seemingly where you toe the line of the old order, but actually extract freedom for yourself. Limited freedom, not satisfying in its entirety. But so I think both are ways of reading it. And I'm sure, possibly. I can't. Of course it is. You are absolutely right. But the fact is, and this is, how does change happen? I mean, the fact is that you can do that. You can have representations of that kind, but they are representations. So the fact, so it's and which brings me back to the question of the incentive. Today there is an incentive. The reason why Havells does a, respect women ad is because it gets, wah-wahs on social media. It is.
Advertising Standards Council. But it's very interesting. So now I hope we're going to have an ad where the husband is keeping Karwa Chauth for the wife, then an ad where the husband and wife are keeping it for their children, then an ad where the whole family is keeping it for their neighborhood, And then I'll add
but
whether
actually
all
you are-
keeping it for
but
some
that's a
you know,
very good
poor
point.
people.
I think that's a very good point. And I think the real test of you know the fact that if it is actually subversion, the real test of it is exactly that. Is exactly if you are able to change the meaning and relocate it, not in this narrow patriarchy, but into a larger context. I absolutely agree with you. That would be the way to go. That would be the way to go.
Subverting at each step. Now, can you please talk about how this conflict between marketing, the corporate world, and the values, the internal dilemmas within an agency, and how, as individuals, you handle these dilemmas, which will obviously arise within individuals as well?
See, as I was saying, that all commerce is all about companies and brands trying to behave like human beings and then make a connection with fellow human beings. Correct? If the connection happens, there will be an emotional affinity. Then even if you put worms into your chocolate or put pesticides into your cola, people will forgive you, because that is what advertising is all about. Brands having an emotional equity. So how do you keep on building that emotional equity? For that, it is like a relationship in marriage. How do you keep that emotional equity over a period of very, very long time? That's what brands try to do. That's what the partners in life will try to do. So you constantly need to change as the world is changing. And today, as I was saying, that there are no product differentials. They're all the same. And the reason to buy one toothpaste versus the other toothpaste, there is absolutely no reason. If you put salt, it takes a nanosecond for somebody else to put. Forget about soaps and toothpaste. Look at high technology things. There is only 3 months, not even 3 months, 2 months gap between a Chinese made phone and versus an iPhone or a Samsung phone. So therefore, what is the discriminator? Correct. So discriminators are becoming softer things. They are not the harder things. So softer things are values. There is nothing else. So therefore, how do one adopt a value? As I said, but in this transparent world, you need to be extremely honest and transparent. You can't adopt honesty as your virtue and then charge higher premiums, or charge more interest rates, or do something else, correct? And then somebody might find faulty with the formula which you are using. So you cannot, then people will reject you within no time. So therefore, the question is, when you are actually seeing the value systems, as we, as human beings, try to discover our own purpose and our own values, the brands and then the corporates also try and then cull out a value from their own DNA, which they can stand for and then which they can fulfill. Correct. That's how the value systems will actually come into the place. You can't have, Tatas can have at least 80% of the time they live with that. But you can't say the same thing with some other company. If you can't do that, people will reject you. So that's on the value system today. Yes. And as far as agencies are concerned, see, we don't own the brands. Big money at stake. Crores and crores and crores of rupees. All these are very tough business decisions. We are at the end of the chain. And then how can you make an impact? One, we can actually push, because in this business, only power which we have sitting in an advertising agency is understanding of people, human beings. And somehow, that is a weapon which we use to influence a brand or a corporate. These are the changes which are happening in the society, and then these are the behavioral changes which are happening, and then we need to reflect and we need to belong to that, otherwise you will become outdated. So as an agency, only somebody talked about accountability. Correct? What is the accountability? Only accountability is your consciousness, and then the real reflection of what is happening in the society. And then if you were to mirror a wrong picture back to the client and then say that, no, this is how people are behaving and that's how we do it. Correct? And then the entire commerce might fail. Correct? So therefore, it is very important that agencies actually represent the voice of consumer to most of the clients. Not just voice, we also have to understand why people behave the way they are behaving. So if you understand why people are doing what they are doing, then it is very easy to really influence that behavioral change in the society, which today we use it in the context of a brand and its usage or its acceptance. But the reason why we are failing in most of the change which we are seeking in the society through CSRs and public service advertising is all of them lack insights. We only have two politicians and then polio drops, and then that is not going to change the behavior of people who actually don't come because there are so many barriers which are there. So I think somewhere the agency's role is to understand people, try and find those insights, and then those behavioral things, find those triggers, and then say that if you do this, behavioral change will happen, and then reflect that, and then go back to the and influence them. And we can only influence. If they don't get influenced, yeah, we'll try it again. Nothing else one can do. Yeah.
Thank you. Sharda, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to know, there somebody has asked whether there is any evaluation of the advertisement. Supposing you make a good ad, I mean the so-called good ad, and then what is the impact on the audience? How is it being reacted by the advertising community and by the audience? So do you have any statistics? How do you work on it?
Maybe you can address that, and then Santosh, if you can address that question.
And also address the...
I also just want to, so there is, yeah. No, I just want to add to what Pops was saying about understanding consumers. I think ad agencies also have the responsibility of understanding businesses, because that is, you might understand consumer behavior, but if it is not linked to your business, okay, and in a highly, highly cluttered competitive market with pressures of margins, with pressures of profits, with pressures of sales, there's competition, and ad agencies do have the responsibility of understanding the client's business and then linking it to a human insight. That comes as a second step. Otherwise brands have become commoditized, A shampoo is a shampoo is a shampoo. But there is something that is different, in the way Levers does things versus in the way P&G does things. If they're both similar, is there something which can be a little more deeper that your business does, which can give you the insight? So that responsibility, I think, is very much on the agencies to link the consumer insights to the business understanding. And from a measurement perspective, there are lots and lots of measures, because finally marketers are spending a lot of money. Okay, crores of rupees are being entrusted by the CFOs to the marketers, and they have to report outcomes. Otherwise, nobody is going to give you those monies. One campaign failure, nothing moves in the marketplace. The next time you can lose your job or you can lose your budgets. So it's almost like, every single campaign that you do, there are researches available, and there are organized, syndicated researches available that tell you whether your brand matrix moved, whether the product moved off the shelf or not, whether the emotional connect with the customer moved. You measure all kinds of things. Of course, the last measure is business. But there are many categories where business is also an outcome of many things beyond advertising. You might create a great pull, but the product is not on the shelf. The product is not well distributed. So there are many other aspects besides advertising. So varying from category to category, you have brand measures, you have business measures, you have shelf offtake measures, you have emotional connect measures, and they're all available, and there's a whole lot of science behind it.
Santosh, chappan ki chhati. And we'd also like you to talk a bit about whether there are internal dilemmas and how you resolve those.
On the chappan inch ki chhati, I think it's true. I think that there has been a masculinization of the political discourse. And I think if you look at the Narendra Modi sort of campaign and the approach, and the campaign, in fact, I think is much more than 1 year old, actually. It's a much longer term campaign. You will find that actually it's not about advertising in a conventional sense. He has used advertising and he has used advertising agencies, but I would find it difficult to in any way believe that what has been created is a function of advertising in a narrow sense. But it is in its entirety an advertising mindset. And the advertising mindset is in you locate a fear or anxiety. You know, you amplify that fear. You create an enemy. You offer yourself as the solution to that. These are set advertising principles. You create powerful iconography. You create symbology. You know, if you look at the number of symbols that have been created, you know, in his campaign, there are a staggering number of symbols that have been created. And so to that extent, his is a classical brand promotion advertising kind of a view of politics, which is a completely new view, because in that sense, the positioning of an individual of that kind, speaking to a motivation and anxiety of that kind, located so sharply and brought alive by so many different symbols. And you look at the use of language from the beginning of the campaign, the sense of an enemy, how you implicate everyday phrases with a certain, you know, it's the secularism ka burkha, for instance, as a phrase. It just so does it use the principles of advertising? Does it use the principles of branding? It does. And has there been a masculinization of the political discourse? Unquestionably. Because that is what, and then therefore part of the larger sort of footprint of that is the kind of social media support that get generated around the extreme part of it, which is an extremely, for instance, it's a hyper masculine kind of a view of the world. So yes, I mean, certainly from an advertising perspective, I would say that this is an advertising and a brand campaign through and through.
No, Subhash, sorry.
See, this is an endless conversation.
Yeah,
so
we're not
we can
going
have that
to
online.
it,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
have it outside.
Just one last thing I think about the dilemma. I think the biggest internal dilemma tends to be this whole question between mainstream, what you think of as a mainstream opinion, and where you echo what exists versus what you want to change. And the fact that very often when you're talking about a brand, your allegiance is actually to the dominant consumer voice. And the dominant consumer voice does not want change. So when you attempt to move the brand forward in any direction, there is in fact, so to speak, the honesty of the profession is to be honest to the consumer. But in being honest to the consumer, very often, because the consumer is not homogeneous, but there is a dominant reality and there is an emerging reality, what do you speak to? Very often when you try and speak to an emergent reality, you find yourself in research, through results, being dragged down and saying, and so many times, some of the most regressive representations, it is surprising how enthusiastically they get endorsed by the very people, the group that they are depicting. So this, in terms of how do you actually have representations of a newer kind, very often this is a real question that you get pulled down very often by the very people, in a sense, or the very community or the very group that you want to represent in a new light. That, I think, is very often a dilemma internally.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we've had a most interesting session. It has the makings of a potboiler. We've got dominance and we've got incremental subversion as one theme. We've got anxiety, insufficiency as one theme. And we've got honesty with benefits as another theme. And symbolism to wrap it all in. So thank you very much to our panelists, most provocative, most interesting, and thank you to the audience for your interest and your questions as well, and to Sharda for having taken the lead in organizing this.